Thanks so much for joining. We're talking about history of monetary policy and recessions. First of all, maybe you can just start by introducing yourself, telling everybody your experience and, what your thoughts are on what we're talking about as it relates to this evolution of the monetary policy. And maybe how Bitcoin's different.
Sure. So I've been involved in the markets since 1989. I actually worked for Lehman Brothers block desk in college or during college from 1989 to 1993. So I was there right after the 87 crash, and we were in the back, it was back office clerking. So they always talked about how hard it was and so on. So been through that, been through the dot-com bubble, been through 9/11. So I think quantitative easing has always been around at some level. The difference now is the coronavirus or COVID-19 has really changed the game. So what you're basically looking at is, unlike 2008, it's no one's fault. Right then, it was the greed of Wall Street, quote unquote, right, that kind of created that whole problem, and it's true, right? But this time, because of what's happening, they're printing more money than, I've never seen anything like this. I don't think anyone else has. There's a great book by Neil Ferguson. There's his famous book, but his first book was called The Cash Nexus, which is a pretty big book, but it gives you the history of cash and how it's been used, for many centuries and so on and so forth. So if you look at the way things always have been, it's kind of the same game over and over again. The government has control over capital. They can create their own capital out of nothing. They can create capital based on some type of asset class like gold. I think everyone keeps on saying, oh, they're printing so much money. The difference here is that everybody wants the money. Everybody's looking for USD. I've never seen anyone move so fast to USD as the March time frame. Like even Bitcoin, people were moving to USD. It doesn't make any sense, right? We expected I expected the decorrelation to happen. Never happened. I actually for my fund, I sold it on my BTC because it was hurting me. So I ended up going to cash anyway, and right now my fund is like 3/4 in cash again, but I come in and out, right? And we've done well in Q1, so because we are super careful, especially in trading altcoins because of the risk. So I think what you're seeing here is the history of monetary policy is kind of based on what's happening. This is different. This is like I just had some very sad news from a friend of mine. He's in the hospital. He's in a medical induced coma. He's in intubation. He's on dialysis. I don't think he's my age. I don't know if he's going to make it. It was very hard to hear that today. But what I did realize was there's no way the world's going back to the same way it was. So we're in for a longer haul here, and this printing of the money, I know no one likes it. It has to be done. It has to be done in order to, because most people don't understand monetary policy. Joe Sixpack doesn't understand monetary policy. So you have to be looking at the reality. That said, as smart investors, we should be looking for those risk factors, bank failure, so on and so forth. But if they're buying junk bonds, if the Federal Reserve is buying junk bonds right now, most banks will not fail. Maybe some small kind of community banks here and there, but most banks are probably not going to fail. So I'll stop there.
So if I could add to that, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the CARES Act, which was passed, which was $2 trillion, is going to put, so there's $500 billion that's immediately going into small business loans. And what we're seeing is some of the larger banks like Wells Fargo are having trouble with that. You've got the stimulus checks that are going to be coming out, and you've got supplementary assistance that's coming out. I concur with Enzo. This is all Keynesian supply side economics on steroids right now. The Fed has allocated the capability to lend at up to $1 trillion a day to individual banks. At the same point in time, there's a bill on the floor that the GOP is pushing to add an additional $250 billion in lending. to small businesses across the United States. Most of these loans are going to be with some sort of forbearance or actually cancellation capability future forward. And then the Fed announced that they're going to add an additional $2.3 trillion in loans to this. So where are we right now? We're at roughly 4.3 trillion authorized, an additional 250 billion coming. My expectation is that we're probably going to be somewhere between $6 and $10 trillion worth of direct injection to the economy before this thing ends. We also have to kind of look at the echo effects of what's happening in terms of supply chains across the United States. Specifically, looking at what had happened after the crash in '29, what went on in the early 1930s. From a monetary policy perspective, the goal here is to prevent stagflation. When we've got 16 million out of work, when we've got jobless claims climbing at over 4 million per week, and when we're talking about quarantines that could very well extend into from July through September, you're looking at an absolute need for states to get involved on lending policy and borrowing policy, specifically to consumers, and we really need to keep businesses open. And I think that's going to be some of the biggest issues that we have to deal with in the short term. Longer term, it's markets and hoping that the markets don't necessarily capitulate to some of the pressures that we're seeing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think overall what we need to establish is what is the money that's out there right now, and who has created it, and what was it being allocated for. I think the main thing that's constantly overlooked here is that we reined in some of the mortgage situations, but it's still a huge number of the money that's out there. It's about 30% of all the money that's out there. And that's not non-productive capital for the most part, right? That's all inflation. Then the second position would be corporate debt. And a lot of that corporate debt, as you guys know, came from stock buybacks, right? So that's also inflationary. And these particular entities should just take the brunt of it, right? And then lastly, and those are going to be the people most impacted, we have about $12 trillion in CDs. So those are the people that we're expecting to save, quote unquote, money, and that's being inflated away drastically right now. So those are typically retired people that need to live off their CD savings, right? And you're entirely inflating this away. So those three positions are by far the largest position of existing money supply. I think people totally don't understand the big picture of what's actually going on. We're talking constantly about things that do not matter at all, right? And so unless we actually contribute new loans to productive activity, given, yes, we should, quote unquote, bail out the consumers. So quote unquote, helicopter money should be out there because people obviously need to live and we don't want to see people on the street. But secondarily, there should no longer be lending for non-productive activity, right? And people who have been lending on, organizations have been lending to unproductive activity need to take the fall for what they did, just like they should have taken the fall in 2008 for that particular type of lending. So that's what needs to happen. That's the learning experience that we need to have here.
But the reality is, so here's the question. If the laws are set properly and they can't do the share buybacks again, we're okay, right? But they're, unfortunately, we're four guys on a screen and we are not Steven Mnuchin. So I think that you have to look at the reality and then brace for the reality of what's going to happen versus what you would like to happen. And
sure.
You can push for what you want to happen. And I have ties, and so does Oz. We have ties with the administration and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, there are certain things I'm trying to push on the blockchain side, which is going to be interesting. But the fact is, we have to live in the reality of it. And I agree with you. I think a lot of that CD money, I think a lot of that CD money that is kind of sitting there in these guaranteed asset pools. I mean, someone mentioned the other day, someone mentioned on the last thing that, everybody in the world, their currencies are going to be devalued. Do you know that the Federal Reserve is now the bank of the world? They are literally buying their paper. So
yes, but that's still not the important part, because the Federal Reserve creates very little money compared to what the commercial banks create, right? It's maximum is 30%. Yeah.
But as a
maximum.
backstop, they're trying to support the entire currency float across the entire world. That's not normal.
It is not. Yeah, and the solution is always this technology, right? I have very little faith in politicians making the right decisions here. I mean, they don't understand basic fundamentals of economics, even though economics is obviously somewhat of a pseudoscience. So we should really revert to maths there. And so that needs to be our objective, to provide technologies for the people that are most affected by these type of inflationary behaviors, so they can sidestep that, like think of DeFi solutions, etc.
Well, I think it's interesting that you touch on DeFi, because I think we're going to see three things happen inside of the next 12 months. One is we're going to see continuous massive capital injection into markets. Two is that the federal loans are going to give way to a perspective whereby people aren't necessarily going to trust their banks anymore, and they're going to be looking for alternative opportunities. I think DeFi is a big one. There's a couple boards that I sit on. There's a couple of boards that Enzo sits on. There's a ton of different cryptocurrencies that are coming into the market, and where they're looking at going is largely towards the populations of disenfranchised Americans, disenfranchised people across the world, which is where I think we could get a lot of uptick in the utilization of something that's not cash. The second thing is the problem with cash. China started burning RMB simply because it was tainted and infected with coronavirus. And one of the bigger challenges we're going to have with pretty much everything is the supply chain. I'm working on a project here for healthcare supply chain, which we're piloting and going to roll out, called RDEE. And the goal is to get it into some of the PPE purchasing, because we've got tons of fraud coming from China. You're going to have tons of fraud inside of a ton of different supply chains for a ton of different products, including food, as things start to collapse over the course of the next 6 months. And then the last aspect of this is that this is very much like the 20s and 30s all over again. We have the opportunity to create not just new fiscal products inside of this, but we have the opportunity to really bring the crypto environments and the blockchain environment into this ecosystem. Caitlin Long has done a tremendous amount of work with special purpose banks in Wyoming. I was just working with the legislators in Rhode Island, and we introduced blockchain legislation that parallels the special purpose vehicle, as well as the Wyoming laws. We're having some conversations with a few other states. And the opportunity here, I think, is one of, in the United States, we need some sort of standardized blockchain legislation. From the White House down, we're going to see moves towards blockchain-based systems coming from the White House inside of the next 2 months. And then longer term, industry is really going to need to figure out how to utilize this technology in a manner and fashion that it actually starts cutting out a lot of the excess, the fat, the graft, the middlemen, because the nature of work inside of 12 months is going to be very different in America outside of the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, I mean, largely to engage with legislation is largely an exercise in fertility. Because, I mean, technology moves at the speed of light, right? We're technology investors. I used to be a lawyer in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. But the point here being is we need to focus on developing the technologies that mitigate for the damages that are being done. And the damages are typically being done by the current middleman, right? And regulators are included in that, because if you actually facilitate transactions in a peer-to-peer fashion, right? So there's nothing to regulate, right? The default transaction, that's what we have to realize, is that of private commerce, at least in our country here and in other nations that are not dictatorships and so forth. Meaning, what one particular example, what you accept as medium of exchange, so to speak, is a secondary agreement to your exchange. If you and I decide we want to trade in Pokemons, and Pokemons are money for our particular purposes. So the larger point here being is what we need to do is implement the technology in the way that's possible right now, not trying to like do intellectual time travel, going back to the days of commodity money. And that's what we see on a regular basis being pitched to us. The functions of money have clearly separated, right? So if we implement these functions correctly in technology, you don't actually have any interactions with regulators, right?
So I basically say this very simply to people who aren't from the blockchain world. I say to them, there is a technology that allows complete and utter fast transference of any type of transaction on a global basis. If I had that software, would you buy it? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. You know, I'd implement it in my company, in my system. So what if it was just open source and it was just out there? I'm like, that's what blockchain is basically. It's the fastest, most efficient software vehicle, and it costs zero to implement. So I think people are starting to get that. That's one in the more of the mainstream tech sector. The other thing is that I know COVID-19 is a horrible thing, and I'm very saddened by seeing what's happening. But this is one of those times in the world where breakthrough technologies start getting adopted. So blockchain now has literally the best chance of really being implemented across multiple supply chain. I mean, think about the three major areas: the capital markets, right, the supply chain, and healthcare or identity. I think healthcare and identity are kind of like married now. But
yeah,
the social distancing, like, why does Google and Apple have to control the social distancing app? Why can't the social distancing app be a private application that's decentralized? That should be a decentralized app.
Right.
We should not be giving them more data.
Yes. So you touched on the bottleneck. The bottleneck overall is quote unquote identity. What I mean by that is, in order to associate any asset or right to an individual, we need to address identity on a public mainnet, because as soon as you have to go back to some data silo, if you're doing KYC and so forth, you're actually back in the old world, right? You cannot do peer-to-peer transactions that way. And worse, you're actually tainting the network. Like custodial exchanges have nothing to do with blockchain, quite obviously, with their databases.
Well, they get intermediated.
Yeah, and so that's the fallacy. So the call to action here to everybody is provide us with an identity solution, right? We have been looking for one for the longest time, but unfortunately everybody's falling into the same trap and creating new profiles, collection of data and so forth, right? And
we just heard about Zoom doing the same thing with Facebook that Cambridge Analytica did with Facebook. I'm like, how does this happen again?
Yes. Yeah. We need to actually reverse the damages that came from the time and attention and data economy that we did over the past 10, 20 years in order to actually survive as human beings.
But the problem is, who's motivated to stop us? So as the blockchain type of community, we have motivations of people that are in power that want to stop this. We're more of a I know that there are some bad actors in the space, but most of us are into helping out the general good, the greater good, but in a way that is decentralized, not really controlling. We're all we're all business people and entrepreneur capitalists, but we see things a little differently. I think the millennial generation sees things the way we see things, and we have to leverage those people to push. I mean, I'm 50 years old almost, but we have to leverage those people basically to push this ahead more and ask for that type of, get involved. Unfortunately, politics is the only way to control this stuff, but you have to be involved. And
so Andrew in the chat was pointing out DIDs. We looked at this long and hard, and unfortunately, it's not where it needs to be right now. We need to get one step back, and probably the solution at the end of the day, it's not going to be blockchains, because blockchains are applications. People keep saying they are protocols, but they're actually applications making use of protocols. So it's more likely that a graph-based solution is going to be the answer here, with cryptographic primitives that are solely under your control, where there's actually no anchor on the public chain. But please,
I do believe that the intermediaries, the custodians of, like Bank in New York is not going to go away as the world's biggest custodian. That's not going to happen. So what they have to figure out is, how do we live in this? They can build efficiencies. I was telling this actually to one of the largest transfer agencies in the world. I know the executive there who is in charge of global innovation, and I was basically telling him, I was like, unfortunately, you can, there's a huge, fortunately for them, there's a huge cost implication that they could save. and then use that capital to do other things, right?
Yeah, I mean, custodians will change. We're already seeing that, right? To where there's some form of multi-sig where they have a role to play intermittently, but then long term, that's going to be other functions, other people fulfilling those functions for those amongst us that feel uncomfortable doing self-custody for their assets, right? But long term, yeah, long term we'll move all the other assets on a decentralized solution, hopefully. Albeit, I think it will take much longer than people think. I mean, SDO specifically are years away. It comes back to you need to solve identity, because if you want to legitimately call something a token, the token is the peer-to-peer instrument of a public blockchain at the end of the day. That's its main function. That's the innovation. Anything else is again just a database entry, right? And that might make intermittent sense for a lot of things, as long as you have a decentralization strategy in mind that provides self-custody.
Well, I would add a couple things. Everyone who's listening, take a look at the Earn It bill that's making its way through Congress right now. The challenge is that you should risk people and telling them not to vote for this thing. And actually, the weird part of getting a hold of Congress is the easiest way to do it is through their phone, to call their switchboard, to get a hold of them, and to actually leave a message. Earn It could really scuttle a lot of efforts towards not only decentralized finance, but decentralized identity. The other challenge we have is bureaucracy right now. The administration is looking for solutions. Google was one of the first ones to kind of come up with this, but looking at the challenges that they're having with everything from privacy, demonetization, and the stripping of access of people on YouTube, to the challenges that they're having with data privacy, to the issues that they're having on an ongoing basis with custodianship of data. This really creates a quagmire for the American people and people globally, because Google's going to take the same type of technology and try and push it to the Europeans. Singapore has a very good, robust solution right now where you actually have to scan people's temperatures, and everything becomes beholden on most of the corporate employers in the country to do that. Now, when we have a large amount of unemployment, when we have a large number of challenges in order to figure out who has COVID, who has walked by whom, you end up with really only 2 points that you can look at. You have the internet companies that have IP information and location information on everyone, or you have the cell providers. And I think the larger aspects of this are, if there's either hackathon-based solutions or other solutions that come up, now's the time to bring these things to the table.
Yeah, since you mentioned my pet peeve, Google. I mean, Google is as bad as Facebook, right? And the larger point there being we need to develop the World Wide Web for the first time. We have not developed the World Wide Web. We developed the commercial web. We let it be controlled by one entity for access, basically, because when you're Googling something, you're not searching anything. You're running a query against the index, mostly the advertising index, either marked as such or indirectly created by SEO. And so in order for all of this to work, we need to take hold of information management. And the point there is really easy to make. Once you decentralize that, once everybody has access to real information, not ad copy and propaganda, you get actually your message out. That's the largest bottleneck right now. We need to build the World Wide Web. And please build a decentralized Google, right? So it's actually pretty easy to do. I mean,
there is a search engine. There's a small search engine called Presearch that's trying to do this. But I agree with all of this. I'm very pro. Let's move down this path. My whole thing is, how do we? It's like I try to get my son to use Presearch.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just he's an engineer student at UCSD, blah blah blah, and he's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like he doesn't care. He doesn't really care that Google has his information, and he's a Gen Zer. So I'm trying to figure out. We're very alarmed by all this, right? Yeah. We're very passionate and alarmed by all this, but most people just, I don't know if they really care. And then by the time they do care, it's too late.
Well, you need to be better.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We have to wrap up this session. This has been a wonderful conversation, but we're running 30 minutes behind, so just want to make room for everybody. So with that said, Oz, if you want to wrap up, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Everyone call your Congress people and yell at them about Earn It. If you have any interest in looking at the healthcare blockchain, talk to me or Enzo. There's a lot of need for people to continue to educate themselves, not just on DeFi, but the decentralized nature of new applications that need to matriculate inside of the next couple of months to the next couple of years. And we are on the tipping point of change. And I'll answer Nick's last question. To the what happens with multinational corporations such as IBM? IBM is leveraging the Hyperledger platform with Stellar for interbank and cross-border transactions. So what's going to happen is they're going to start disrupting some of the banking infrastructure in Europe. Now, will this come here? I'm not necessarily sure. Will it change the nature of how people work with hawalas and other payment systems that billions of people across the globe use? I don't know. But the opportunities right now are for a tremendous number of you to get more engaged and to be the change that you want to see.
Great, guys. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time, and good luck with everything. And stay safe. Stay home.
Thanks, guys.
Too soon.
All right.